Welcome to the study of John. I'm Ann White, and today we're going to be discussing chapter 10 of the Gospel of John. In our last lesson, we saw in chapter 9 that Jesus has been teaching in the temple courts. And so as we transition into this next chapter, Jesus was talking to the Pharisees. And one of the last things that the Pharisees said to him as he told them that he was the light of the world and that they were blind, they said, "Are we blind too?" So Jesus goes on talking to them. And today what we're going to see is in this particular chapter, Jesus is now going to teach them about the shepherd and his relationship to the sheep. And then as we go on through the chapter, we'll see after Jesus finishes this lesson that the people are still divided. The Pharisees still don't want to believe, and there's still conflict over who Jesus claims to be. There are several I am statements in here, and this is still part of the festival series of the Gospel of John. So let's get into our chapter as we get started. And Jesus, as I said, is there with the Pharisees. He's talking to the leaders, the Jewish leaders, and he begins this chapter once again saying, "Truly, truly, very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in some other way, is a thief and a robber." Now, they're not really understanding this, but he's going to go ahead and talk to them a little bit more, and then we'll see the first I am statement of this particular chapter. Jesus in verse 2 continues to tell them, "The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him," which would be God, "and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls them by name, and he leads them." Verse 4, "When he has brought out all of his own, all of his sheep, he goes on ahead of them, and then his sheep will follow, because they know his voice." They recognize his voice. And that's one of the things we're going to learn today is, are we in God's word enough to truly be his sheep? Do we recognize his voice? But they're not ever going to follow a stranger, Jesus says. In fact, they'll run away because they don't recognize a stranger's voice. Now, Jesus used this figure of speech, he says in verse 6, but the Pharisees did not understand, John tells us. They didn't have a clue what he was saying. They don't understand him because they have closed their eyes, they've closed their ears, and they don't want to hear anything unless it relates to their law or their traditions. So Jesus now goes on to tell them in this next verse, "Very truly, 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 I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep." He makes it clear as day. And what we need to really understand is why Jesus is using this metaphor. Why is he talking about sheep? Sheep is certainly something that they can understand. And remember, Jesus will relate to us. He'll talk to us, and he'll speak to us through Scripture and through the Holy Spirit in ways that we can relate to him. So he's talking to them about sheep. Sheep is something that they do know about. Sheep, they understand, are not real smart animals. They're animals that need to be led. They need to understand their shepherd's voice so that they'll follow him, and they need to be guided. They also have a tendency to get cast down. I love this passage in Matthew 9:36. It says, Matthew tells us a little bit about Jesus, and he says, "When Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were bewildered and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd." Sheep are the most helpless animals unless they're being shepherded. Matter of fact, there's a time that they can get cast down, and what that means is a sheep who is heavy and has long fur and has just kind of a gluttony for life. That sheep, if it lays down, sometimes it'll get on its side to get comfortable. And if it rolls a little bit too far where its feet aren't touching the ground, it gets on its back and it can't get up. And it literally is helpless unless the shepherd comes and helps. So Jesus is talking to them in this manner, and he goes on to tell them that very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers. So he's talking about the Pharisees that are before him right now. But the sheep won't listen to them because they don't recognize his voice. He's going to tell them again, I am the gate. Now remember at the very beginning in verse 1, Jesus said that anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate and climbs in another way is a thief and a robber. So hopefully by this time the Pharisees are beginning to understand what he's trying to say to them. He's saying that you Pharisees are trying to get to God a different way. You're trying to obey your traditions, your laws, your rules, and your regulations. But I'm here to tell you, I'm the way, I'm the gate, I'm the shepherd. Listen to my voice, open your hearts and minds, and hear me once and for all. Jesus goes on to say in verse 10, the thief only comes to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Now I love this verse because Jesus didn't just come to earth just for our eternal salvation. He saved us for the here and now. He's the gate. He's the eternal salvation. But he came to give us life, life here and now and life for eternity, but a life that is abundant and full. And if we will simply embrace him and get to know him on a personal basis, be in his word on a daily basis, I know that's been what I've experienced throughout my life, and I pray that that's what you're experiencing as you dig further into God's word. In verse 11, he says, I am the good shepherd. And then as he says this, he's going to repeat a statement 4 times in the rest of these verses. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He repeats it again in verse 15. I lay down my life for the sheep. And he repeats it again and again in verse 17 and 18. I lay down my life. And what Jesus is saying, hear me. He's repeating. He's trying to get their attention. He's trying to get them to notice. I'm going to lay my life down for the sheep. That's what I do. Jesus goes on to say, I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know him. And I lay my life down for the sheep. Now the Jews and Pharisees are listening to this. Again, they're still divided, as we've seen them divided all throughout these chapters. Now some of them say, he's a demon, he's possessed, he's raving mad. Why are we even listening to him? But others were saying as they listened to him in verse 21, can a demon open the eyes of the blind? Just like he did in the blind man in the last chapter that we read. Now we get to verse 22. Now we're going to divide this chapter and we're going to go into another festival. We're still in the festival series of the Gospel of John. And in verse 22, it tells us that then came the festival of dedication in Jerusalem. This is around December. It's winter time. So the Jews are all gathered around him and listen to what they say. They say, how long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, just tell us plainly. I did tell you, but you do not believe. You do not believe because you're not my sheep. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them and they follow me. Do you listen to the voice of Jesus? Do you read God's word? Do you listen to the Holy Spirit in your quiet time? And do you listen and follow like Christ says that his sheep do? Because he goes on to say in verse 28, I give my sheep eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one can snatch them out of my Father's hand. Once you are with the Father, no one's going to take you back. You're there for eternity. I and the Father are one, and he's just being very plain. He's told them and told them and told them. They still don't want to listen. Again, in this chapter, we see in verse 31, his Jewish opponents pick up stones and persecute him and want to stone him. But Jesus says, I have shown you many good works. Man, if you don't believe what I say, look at what the Father's enabled me to do. For which of these good works would you want to stone me? And they say, we're not stoning you for your good work. They tell Jesus they're stoning him for blasphemy because you claim to be God. So now they get it. They know who he's claiming to be. Jesus has made it plain. Is it not written in your law? And Scripture cannot be set aside. You accuse me of blasphemy because I said, I am God's son. Do not believe me unless I do the works of my Father. But if I do them, even though you don't believe those works. So he continues to tell them, all you've got to do is believe. Jesus isn't asking for anything difficult, and he doesn't ask for anything difficult from us today. And know and understand that the Father is in him and he is in the Father. The Pharisees and the leaders try to seize him, but it's not yet the time. So Jesus went back across the Jordan. At the end of this chapter, we're going to see that he goes back to where John is baptizing. And once again, he escapes. But he had shown so many signs that even at this time, many people did believe. So let's do what we've done in every chapter up to this point, in every lesson that we've gone through. Let's take a look at what we've learned out of this. Because if we simply take from God's word and let it just be head knowledge, it does us no good. So unless we let it seep into our hearts and apply it to our lives, we're not going to be changed. So what is the timeless life lesson that we get from these chapters? Jesus is the shepherd, and he shepherds his sheep and protects. And if we recognize his voice and follow him, we will have eternal life. So the question is, are you listening to the shepherd? Are you in his word? And are you following him? Thanks so much for joining me for this lesson on chapter 10. And I pray that you'll join me for chapter 11. God bless you and have a great day.